Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Book Leads Impactful Books for Life and Leadership. I'm your series host and leadership performance coach, John Jaramillo. This podcast series is about getting to the books that have impacted the lives of the people in my network. So these are great leads that I'll be having conversations with to get to those books that have left the best mark, the most impact on their life, their work, their entrepreneurship, their business, whatever it may be. And my guest today is Lee Desjardins. And Rebecca is a lifelong learner and coach committed to engaging people in meaningful moments that promote personal growth, leadership development, and a greater sense of community. As a behavioral agility coach, Rebecca uses the BioCode System to teach strategies that leverage stress as a tool for leadership development and personal wellness. As a community leader at the Connext Exchange, she invites connection, reflection, and exploration through conversation. And guided by curiosity and hope, Rebecca believes in the power of possibility and the unrealized potential of our shared humanity. And I met Rebecca 5.5 years ago. This is another great guest, friend, and colleague that I met during the pandemic. In the first couple weeks of the pandemic, Brent Robertson at then Fathom had developed this online community for people to come and talk about what was going on in the world, specifically, obviously, to COVID, to see what was going to be created next, what the stage was, that you get these disruptions and it's important to proactively think about what's going to come next. So Brent hosted this series for 2 straight weeks during the weekdays. And then after that, he allowed participants, volunteers to present on different themes. And then that evolved into another community, the Connext Exchange, which I just mentioned, So Rebecca was one of these people that I believe, Rebecca, you were there from the beginning, maybe the first Create What's Needed show or meeting, if you will. And Rebecca just has this way about her that bio captures it beautifully, where she's about humanity, where she's about learning, curiosity, community, service. So I'm grateful. This is one of those silver linings from COVID where it got me to meet different people. We were all forced online, learned a lot about each other, opened up to each other. It was very transparent. And just in doing that, you got to see the best of who our fellow humans are. So I'm grateful for having met Rebecca through that community, having stayed in touch. So Rebecca, thank you for joining me.
Thank you, John. I'm so excited to be here and share that sentiment. There were some hidden gifts in a worldwide pandemic that was tragic for so many on so many levels. There were a few sprinklings of gifts in there that have continued.
Yeah, there were. If you paid attention, if you took them away, if you kind of invested in what you got from that time, it's incredible to build upon. I've learned so much from you and everybody else in that community. I've hosted them on this series. I hosted you on the series before for technical reasons. It didn't work out. And we were having some glitches this morning, which were my fault, but here we are. So before we dive into the conversation on the book you brought to the table, tell me a little bit more about who you are today, just so the audience can get a sense of who you are and who's bringing this book to their attention.
Absolutely. Thank you. I love that the question is, who am I today? Because more and more, I just feel I'm in a constant state of evolution and kind of coming back home to myself. So beyond the bio, I am this curious lifelong learner, most recently really diving deep into some spirituality and personal reflection and personal growth, which is awesome. I love to learn. And kind of returning a little bit to childhood, Rebecca, this person, this soul that wants to just help people use her voice and rolling with that evolution. So in a state of becoming. And how that's showing up professionally is using some tools and skills I've learned along the way to leverage into those places where I can connect people and be a prompt to invite people to connect with themselves and show up better for themselves and for community. You know, my background is marketing, communications, and event planning, and touching personal wellness and leadership all along the way. So diving into that feels like a really good culmination.
Can you speak a little bit to the BioCode System? The first time I had heard about the system was when you started posting about it on LinkedIn. Can you share a little bit with the audience about what that is and how it works?
Yeah, absolutely. This is a practice that I learned in 2019. So right before COVID, I was Zooming with the creator, Dr. Jill Kahn, before Zooming was cool. And it's a practice that she created that we call it's a daily inner workout, and it helps you leverage stress as a tool for personal growth. It's 5 unique biocodes, but ultimately it helps you live in the moment and show up better when life challenges you. We know that life is going to continue to throw problems and challenges, and the difference really is how we show up to meet them. And if we can leverage them as a way to make us stronger in the moment, if we can take responsibility for our thoughts and our behaviors and not look around and blame everyone else for our challenges, if we take ownership for how we show up, the world around us changes. If we greet chaos with calm, if we bring calm to a situation, if we bring stability to emotional situations, if we bring curiosity to moments of unknown, we experience life differently, and we're healthier, we're better leaders, we can be kinder, we can be better role models. So on a high level, that's what it's about. And it's a practice. So it's one of these things like you learn how to run or you learn how to lift weights, but if you never go back to the gym again, it's not going to do you any good.
Yeah.
And it's definitely a practice.
So much, speaking of things that came out of COVID, so much had come out about mental health. The conversation on mental health picked up during COVID more than it seemed to have in the past. It really took grasp of the societal, the global conversation. In addition to that, there has been a lot of talk. You see more written about, spoken about when it comes to stress. For you, working in the BioCode system, what have you seen evolve in terms of stress and how people are handling it over the course of these, say, 5 years since the pandemic started? How have you seen the conversation shift? How have you seen your coaching work shift? What are the trends you're seeing?
I think what's interesting for me personally, in 2019 and 2020 and certainly 2021, I had the great privilege of being in this learning bubble. So being in this space and learning this skill set for myself, which was great and wonderful and an asset then. And then I went into the world of event planning for 3 years, and working with couples and families, planning weddings and special events and managing teams again, and seeing how stressed and anxious people really are. And outside of that bubble, I was like, oh, this is really needed. And there's a lot of talk about it, certainly, and there's a lot of talk about prioritizing meditation or vacations or personal time or slowing down. But what is the practice? I can take a break and read a book on a beach for a day or a few hours, but when I'm in traffic, how am I showing up? When a conversation goes sideways, how am I showing up? So that's how I've experienced personally and observing those sorts of things is we can know what to do, but if we don't practice it, we don't end up doing it. So I still see a bit of a disconnect there. It's nice to hear the language and have people be able to recognize in a calm, quiet moment. But ideally, we can show up better in the day when we have a skill set to practice and not just the knowledge to reference on our bookshelf.
Yeah. Yeah, I think too many people buy the books, read the articles, maybe go to one seminar, but it's this constant need for exercising that muscle. That's exactly what it is. It's an ongoing daily practice and habit that you need, not just a solution that you reach for when it's finally needed, when you finally get to that point where you're burned out or whatever that end result may be. So, Rebecca, for you, getting to everything you've spoken about, everything you're into, everything you're doing these days, what does your path to today look like from, say, high school or when you went into the workforce? What does that look like up until now? Because I'm always curious, about somebody's story and what it is that led them to the person that's sitting in front of us today.
Yeah, this is something I've been reflecting on even more for myself lately. I think up through college graduation, I was this person who things went according to plan, by and large. Like I had a vision, I was going to do this and I would do it. And maybe there was some natural manifesting in there if you're that type of person. And then after that, maybe you call it the real world. I got my first big girl job and worked hard because that's the type of person that I am. And that's how I was raised. Like, you work hard, you succeed. And I learned that wasn't the truth. You could work hard, you could do a good job, but there are personalities and there are perceptions and there's politics. And, had my position abolished from my first big girl job. So I was doing all the right things and yet somehow I was unemployed. So there was this realizing of identity attached to work. So that was like a really big learning curve. My dad passed at a young age. So this idea of, life doesn't go according to plan. Things happen, these big things that you're going to have to deal with. And that's definitely started a journey of what am I prioritizing and what really matters. And actually kind of ties into the topic of the book. Like, am I spending time on these little minute details, or am I spending time on the big things that matter? Like, what ultimately matters? And I've definitely been a workaholic in my life. I've worked hard for other people, and I've learned some lessons there about why am I so willing to work so hard for someone else when it comes to my own thing? Why do I put other people first? So those kind of key pieces have definitely helped me arrive on this current path of investing in myself a little bit more. Again, I think this is one of those knowledge pieces that we hear, right? Like, on a plane, put your mask on first. Like, you got to take care of yourself. If you don't take care of yourself, you're no good for anyone else. But how many of us really do that? There's still this message about being selfish, or self-care being a perk or a luxury, when it's really mandatory. And that's been a big mindset shift in my world. And it does matter. Each of us matter. So by investing in ourselves, we really do honor not only ourselves, but those around us.
So what kind of industries or fields did you work in, after college up until the last couple of years? What did that path look like?
Yeah, I started by working at my alma mater in college communications, was quickly promoted to the director of communications, so responsible for all marketing and public relations, had a work cell phone at the age of 22, was sitting around the table with the administrative council, people in their 60s or 70s, a lot of white-haired men, and there I was, a recent graduate, not afraid to ask questions and raise my hand and say what was obvious to me because I hadn't learned the game of,
That's awesome. I love that. I love that. Just the point that you make about, because you don't know what you don't know. It's like, okay, I got to find out. I got to ask questions. And it's always like that when somebody's new to an organization. Anytime I've worked with them as a coach or side by side with them, I always pick their brain. Like, what do you see? When you come in here, what can you bring from the outside? Before this culture invades your mind, and you're overtaken by it and you buy into it blindly, I want to capture your fresh mind. So that's always a great point to bring up is, knowing what you don't know and asking questions because you want to find out, even if somebody doesn't want to hear those questions or whatever the case may be. So that's a great reminder.
It is a great reminder, and it was interesting then and, now 20 plus years later of navigating those environments. And I do think it is an asset. Curiosity is an asset, asking questions, giving honest answers. I also am the type of person, I don't want to be in a room surrounded by yes people. I want people to be honest with me. And if I have a blind spot, I want them to be able to tell me. But I did learn that that's not valued everywhere. So navigating those environments is interesting. So that was in education, which I love. I'm still very passionate about education. After that position, I worked at an engineering firm doing in the marketing department, doing proposals. It was a totally different speed, a lot slower, to the point where I started creating projects. So I created a personal and professional development series and
series. Not like a pamphlet, not a manual, but a series.
No, we were doing like 1 hour kind of in a box, kind of like what we do at the Connext Exchange. Like, here's a topic, here's how we can talk about it, here's how you can grow from it, and finding ways to make the job more interesting for me.
Yeah.
And I remember when I left that job, the owner of the company, he was disappointed. And I told him, I was like, I'm not doing the job you're paying me to do. Like, he's like, but that's okay. You're a disruptor. And like, I met someone that appreciated that. And that was an interesting lesson. Yeah. And from there went on to events and a business partnership where I was part of a mixed martial arts promotion and hosting 5 key charity runs for veterans charities. And then went back to education and communications. And then moved back to Connecticut. Ultimately, my mom was not well and cared for her. And then kind of started on this more personal journey of like why am I really here? Like part of me knows, but why am I really here and how does it show up and what does it look like? And then worked as a wedding event manager for 3 years while trying to do things along with that. But again, I quickly allow my vocation to take over my life. So seeking that fluidity is an ongoing journey for me.
So in those moments when you lost your father, when you lost your mother, and you said you referred to it before, kind of like it woke you up.
Yeah.
So in real time when that was happening, when you're that young, what did that look like for you in terms of how you looked at career? Did you make any changes? Did you make any lists of priorities? Like, what did that look like? You had referenced that you had to reprioritize where and when and how things were important. What did that look like for you with those losses and then reassessing where you were?
Yeah, age and youth is relative. Both of my parents died in their early 50s. So I was in my 20s, early 30s. And so that first job, again, marketing communications, we went through a logo design. And I do remember vividly this one moment of I had spent hours working with my team talking about what PMS color and the shape of the athletic logo, like the shape of the eyeball for the marlin in our athletic logo. And I remember very clearly, like, is this what I'm meant to spend my life on? And a resounding for me, the answer is no. Like those things have their places and everyone has their gifts, but there is always this push-pull, calling for something else. And, people would say to me, but you are making a difference. It helps recruit students to education. I was like, yeah, I get it. I'm not saying it's nothing.
Yeah.
I'm just saying it's not for me. So I think in terms of formally making a list, not necessarily, but these messages that came along, I think even more as a child, I grew up in a family business and there was this just life. I grew up on a dairy farm, my grandparents' dairy farm that my dad and all my uncles worked on. My mom worked on here and there, or she worked on other farms in the area. And it's just this different lifestyle because the lines are blurry. So yes, we didn't do family vacations and maybe dinner was late, but if my dad wanted to come to my softball game, he could do it. Or if I wasn't feeling well, I could, go to work with my mom and sit in the office or something like that. So I think there's always this craving for this fluidity and alignment of having one life insteed of this work box and this life box. Because definitely when there's a rub there, I feel that really hard. And I think when my mom passed, she had end-stage liver disease, so it was very different. My dad died very suddenly, and my mom was sick for a little over a year, and we're in and out of the hospital and ER, and just that message of taking care of yourself got really cemented in my mind. It's mandatory. If you don't have your health, you have nothing. So it's interesting, again, how so many of us, myself included, I know I should get up in the morning and go for a walk or a run. Do I? Not yet. But getting rest or drinking water or eating better, those are the things that matter, that allow you to be able to do what you want to do and show up how you want to be. So I think those were the things. And finding myself when I worked as a wedding event manager, again, getting in this loop, that was the last time I'm going to do that. Because it was like, how did you end up here again? Like the DNA is so deep.
So what was it? Was it a favor to somebody? Did you forget the lessons from the first round of wedding planning or event planning? Like, what was it?
Yeah.
What did you think might change that second go around, or what was it that drew you in?
Yeah. What drew me in is bringing people together. I love events, truly. Like, I'm the connector among my friends. I host an annual pool party for some of my cousin's kiddos. That's coming up in a couple of weeks. Like, I love to do that. I love to bring something together. I like the cycle of an event, the planning, the execution, the problem solving, the celebration. When you do it, it boxes up nicely. And it came at a time where it felt really in line with who I am and who I was, and I needed to pay the bills. And I loved the job, but the volume was too much and was unsustainable. And this resistance of like, I will not fail, but at what cost? Like, I failed myself, to pour myself into something else, to make sure that I was showing up for other people. And it cost me personally in my health.
You've talked about, I forget if you mentioned it after I hit record, I know we talked about it before, your perfectionism.
Yes.
So where does that come from? Where did that manifest when you were younger? And can you speak to it, just going through life and what it the benefits, the pros, the cons, a little bit of all of that. What is perfectionism meant to you in your life?
Yeah, it is interesting because I'm still trying to pinpoint, and maybe it ultimately doesn't matter where it came from. There's not this vivid moment of someone saying, you're doing it wrong, or you're not enough, or do it like this. So it's interesting, though, in a recent conversation, I was talking with someone about growing up on a farm and things not going according to plan. And then I had this vision of like, I'm going to be the person that wears a suit and heels and goes to an office. And he recognized like kind of the contradiction of, you were looking for something more perfect. And I was like, oh, well, maybe that was it. Like, maybe the messiness of my childhood pushed me that way, but not knowingly. I think I've always been a high achiever, so I was very much a straight A student, and not because anyone was standing over me yelling at me. It's how I came out. So then it's like, this is the level, where else do you go but down? And in, my early 20s, I started to recognize where it was preventing me from trying things. And I'm very thankful that awareness came in, and I was realizing like, you're missing out on things because you're not even willing to try, because you're anticipating you might not be good or you might fail at something. I think it's an asset where, like, if something's in my hands, generally it's a good outcome because I'm going to make sure that things are lined up, and whether I plan it in advance or do it last minute, like, my attention to detail is an asset where it's an asset. Or it becomes an investment of time that could become a hurdle when it's not necessary. So I was very fortunate in my 20s to kind of choose to test the waters and things I thought I might not be good at, again, without an invitation for someone else, which was interesting. So I enrolled in an adult tap class, which was interesting.
Not what I expected to hear. Were you always curious about it up until that point, or you just wanted to throw yourself into something you didn't feel comfortable with? Or
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. No, I was never in dance as a child. In fact, I remember always loving music and dancing, like at family parties, but this feeling of like, dance should be fluid and natural, like there shouldn't be choreography, like as my 8-year-old self or whatever.
I like that though. I find in my old age now that I do like taking something completely out of left field and going for it. Where in the past it might have been about keeping up appearances and getting the good grade, and it has to look a certain way. At a certain point, it's like you realize, I don't know when it was for me. If we sat here longer, I could probably figure it out, but we don't need to. But it is curious to get to that point and say, you feel like a freedom. I don't know if it's a particular point or a gradual development that you're going through, but you get to this point of freedom where it's like, why? Why am I waiting? Why am I concerned about, I should care what people think, but in relation to what I need to build. But in terms of trying things in life, in terms of experimenting, if something doesn't work out, why am I waiting? Like, what will it cost me to go try something and it doesn't work out?
Yes.
And I can't trace it to a particular moment, but I think there are moments, like you said, where you realize what you gave up. You realize what you didn't try. And maybe no one else knows it, but you know that you weren't willing to put yourself out there. And maybe you start accumulating this regret.
Right.
So it is interesting to get to that point where it really is a sense of freedom, that you're not accountable to these fears that you have, that it's not going to look right or it's not going to look perfectly choreographed, whatever it may be.
Yeah.
It's freedom, I think, is what it is. It's incredible.
Yeah, thank you for assigning that word to it. I think that's true. And these self-imposed restraints that I was putting on myself, or that, so many of us put on ourselves, because why? Like, what's the worst case and what's the best case? Asking those questions.
Yes.
And I think from the losses of both of my parents, something that just we don't have forever. We really, I'll speak for myself. I take time for granted. I'm overly optimistic about the amount of time I have and the amount of things I can do in a certain amount of time. So if I'm spending all of this time already anticipating how something's going to go, like, that's just a waste.
Yeah.
And again, I'm not always successful in that practice, but it is a knowing and a practice that I continue to work on.
What's great about it is it makes the world like your canvas. It really does. Because it allows you to design whatever it is you want, whatever it is. There's few rare limitations, right? Maybe something that's extremely out of your reach, but for the most part, you can design whatever it is you want, because there's so much that we've held ourselves back from in life, whether it's like a chance encounter, whether it's trying a sport, whether it's dancing or tapping, whatever it may be. There's just so much out there. And I think that's made me a happier person, is knowing that I didn't have to have it all perfect, and realizing how much is out there to be had, to be achieved, to be lived, experienced. If I go try something with my kid and it doesn't work out, but we had a blast doing it, like that, notch that up to success, just what you feel in that moment of trying something new.
Yeah, and what a beautiful lesson for your kids, right? To start them out
absolutely
young, of life is here to be experienced.
Absolutely.
I mean, if not, what else? And I think there are so many social and cultural norms, even talking about specifically professionally and vocations, the idea that, well, I've been in this job for 10 years, why would I leave?
Yeah.
Well, if it's not working for you anymore, it's okay to evolve.
Yes.
That freedom is a great word for it.
Yeah, I like that part about being a dad and just passing that lesson on. I didn't get that as a kid. Just my parents were always busy working. It wasn't a lack of love or consideration or none of that. But I love that I can afford to, in every way, just have that, appreciate that curiosity, and show my kids, like, it's okay to try and not be successful. And they're kids, they think it's the end of the world if they don't succeed. But I really do love that the moments where I'm like, it's all right, let's try again. Or if you don't want to try this again and something else draws your attention, let's go try that. There's so much out there in the world. Rebecca, for you, how do you reconcile who you are today, the work you're doing today, to who you were as a kid? I'm always curious about, and I think you had referenced it before, I'm always curious about how much of someone's childhood, who they were as a kid, they bring forward to the work they're doing. I've seen it where most of my clients, when they get to the point where they're most fulfilled, is when they go back to their truer self. Instead of just sticking to a job description, they bring in more of who they've always wanted to be. So for you, how do you put that to words in terms of who you were as a kid and the work you're doing now?
Yeah, I think there is a beautiful line that's maybe this string, or that has bent but not broken through evolution of all of these experiences, and I've learned something through all of these experiences. But I go back to, as a kid, when someone said, what do you want to be when you grow up? I didn't say a doctor, and like didn't have a job title. I would say I want to write, travel, and help people. And I still feel that a little bit now. Like there's not this category. I think one, because I am curious and so many things interest me. So sometimes it can be challenging to have this narrow focus. And I think my focus and my attention is more toward who I am and how I am in the world. And that is going to fuel what I do versus this external job title or external goal or benchmark. So I think that this curiosity that I had as a child, this version of freedom, again, with how I grew up, continuing to long for that life is not boxes. Like we have one life. We don't have this much time over here and this much time over here. So finding that fluidity, making time for people, because that's how I grew up. I was very much had this benefit of being raised by family, not just my parents or, daycare or a caretaker or school, but kind of this community of people. And I think we are better in community. We thrive together. And I think that, again, is something I can say now that definitely came out of my experience and how I grew up. You know, I had parents that were silly and liked to play and played practical jokes on each other and include me in it. There wasn't this top-down adult kid thing. Like, certainly they were my parents. But there was this togetherness, and a dad who had the kind of presence of like, we'll figure it out. So I think when I invite change into my world, or when change comes, we'll figure it out, you know? So the idea of feeling defeated, like failure almost isn't a thing. Like it's how we process the events around us. And that, you know, shows up in a couple different ways. Like, let's get curious about what's possible. That is one of the tenets actually in the biocodes that reinforce that. Like, if this doesn't work, I wonder what will. You know, and getting comfortable with our relationship with the unknown, but also that curiosity and believing in ourselves that we have the power to figure something out. And failure is just an experience. It's not the end. That was something I've been more deeply introduced to Dr. Wayne Dyer, who is in, you know, wellness and spirituality, a pretty well-known teacher. And that was something in one of his writings, like there's no such thing as failure. Failure is just knowledge, you know, that perception. When something doesn't work out, it's just knowledge. So I think leveraging that more recently is really powerful.
It's so freeing. It really is so freeing. The other question I want to ask, obviously since college, you'd said marketing and communications for college, right?
Yep.
Since then, your trajectory in career, I see marketing, I see communications. What made you go into marketing and communications when it was time for college? What drew you to that field?
Yeah. So as part of my write, travel, and help people, as a kid, my vision was to publish poetry. Still is. Like, that's still on Rebecca's life to-do list. So again,
I see it.
What's taken me so long, right? And there was that message of like, well, writers have a hard time supporting themselves. Like, how are you going to pay the bills? You know, so that was a conversation. So I was like, well, all right, how can I write and pay the bills? And that led to an interest in journalism, which I did work for a local community paper for a while. I majored in communications with a journalism track. And then ultimately that fed into public relations and marketing and communication, and just kind of expanded from there. And events were always kind of part of that. So again, this evolution of things that you don't know until you're there and you experience it, and different doors open and paths present themselves. But ultimately it came from a love of writing poetry and writing down thoughts, and how could I leverage that?
I mean, all those areas are storytelling, are expression.
Yes.
Whether it's your expression of yourself or helping someone else get the words out right or paint the right picture. So I love that through line.
Yeah.
So talking about so many great attributes you have, all the great lessons you've learned, what do you consider your superpower?
Ooh. Asking questions. I I think being curious and asking questions and the ability to connect through conversation with anyone. Truly, I am willing to talk with anyone who's willing to talk back to me. And I do think that's how we learn from each other. So that combination of curiosity and a willingness to ask questions and approach life with curiosity first. Judgment always comes in. It's always going to be there. I don't think any of us has to try to judge. Like, that comes naturally. So how can we just be curious?
Absolutely. And before we jump into the book, I'd be remiss as a leadership coach if I didn't ask, but what does leadership mean to you? What does great leadership look like?
Yeah, I think leadership can look any different number of ways. For me, it's a staple of how you show up, whether you're a quiet leader, a vocal leader, someone who leads by example. For me personally, when I have led teams, I think it's about helping people find their place on the team. I love teamwork. So for me, being a good leader is recognizing what can John bring to the table and how can I help him be his best today? Where can I put him that he can shine and thus help the team? That also was one of my favorite things about working in event planning is when you have a team, I would say at the beginning of an event, like if you aren't feeling up to being front of house today, let me know. Because again, if you succeed, the team succeeds. So I think that the puzzle, the human puzzle, right, of finding where we each fit in, where each of our unique gifts, whether it's innately who we are or who we have the ability to show up being that day. So to see people, to help people find the place where they can shine, I think that feels true to leadership for me. Good leadership.
I love it. Yeah. And now jumping into the book, why don't you introduce the book, full title, everything, and then how you came across the book?
Yeah, beautiful, beautiful. I'll hold up my prop here. So the book is called Brave, Not Perfect by Reshma Saujani. The subtitle is Fear Less, Fail More, and Live Bolder. So this book is a few years old. She's written, I think, 2 more since then. She herself has evolved in what she is out there doing and talking about. She has a TED Talk about being brave, not perfect. Again, I think it's like 6 or 7 years old now. So as we've talked about, perfection or being a recovering perfectionist has definitely been a theme in my life. And a few years ago when she was promoting this book, I was back in Connecticut and we were watching the morning talk shows and she was being interviewed. And it was one of those moments, maybe I've experienced this like 3 to 5 times in my life where I felt like, oh my God, they're talking to me. Like she is talking to me. And she was talking about the book and started to introduce it by saying things like, have you had those moments where you see someone that accomplished some things and you're like, wait a minute, I said I was going to do that. Why am I not doing it? Like, what's stopping me? So kind of getting into it from that perspective. And there were a few things in that interview, the action points that she said that literally that day I went and ordered the book and read it, and a bunch of things just started to make sense.
Now, I had mentioned before that we did try to do this conversation a couple of years ago now.
Yeah.
And before we hit record today, you had mentioned how funny it was that what you're taking away from it now, having read it sooner to now than the first time you read it or when we first discussed it, the way you look at it, what you take away from it is different. So can you speak to that? What was it you might have taken away then versus now?
Yeah. So the first time around, the way she writes this book, she talks about her own personal experience running for Congress and losing an election. And again, here she was this person that put herself out there, did all this hard work and ultimately lost, and then kind of the recovery from that. Also in the book is some scientific research, some anecdotal stories, interviews with other people, how they've processed failure, how things have held them back when they've chosen to be brave. So I think the first time it was making sense of this journey that I've been through of like, oh, I can see that. You know, she talks about, she founded the nonprofit Girls Who Code, getting girls into the career of coding and that interest through STEM, and talking about how boys, so it is a little bit genderized, and we can see how perfection plays out with humanity, but also it can be genderized. I think there's a race angle in there too, in terms of other people's expectations of who needs to be perfect, and who needs to be brave. I think it works both ways. And where girls in the class would ask for help and the teacher would come over and there would be no work on the screen. But if the teacher did undo, they would see what the girls tried. So the takeaway from that is that girls would rather show that they'd done nothing than they'd tried and failed, where, the boys were just trying and trying and trying. So like, what are these messages that kind of come out? Or the idea of, two kids playing on a playground and maybe the girl is expected to not have sandy knees or like the Kool-Aid mustache, but it's okay for the boy. So where are these cultural messages coming in? And then the recovery of it, or the how do you get yourself out of these habits, like the idea of intentionally failing, like intentionally doing something that's not perfect or trying things that you think you won't be good at. So when she had said that, I was like, oh, I already did that. Like, again, this like achievement of like, oh, I'm ahead of the game, but tell me more. And the idea of just starting. So these messages of overcoming it fed the journey that I was already on. And then I think years removed from it, so mentioning that I'm kind of in this reinvention phase, starting to push coaching more and being an asset there. And I've set up businesses for other people. I've done strategic planning and marketing campaigns and like the rollout. Like I know how it's supposed to go. I know how you put the bow on it, then you undo the bow and you present it and it's beautiful and lovely and wonderful. And in doing my own thing, that has become a huge hurdle because I'm not allowing myself to be done. I'm continuing to tinker for something different or something better and seeing how perfectionism is creeping in again. And then, and maybe the stakes are a little higher here, like certainly first impressions matter, having your stuff together matters. It's not an adult tap class where there's no consequences. But I'm also recognizing for myself that if I feel like I always need to have something more before I'm ready, it's never going to happen. Like it's never going to happen. So I just need to start. And even if the stakes are higher. So several months ago, a friend invited me to a wellness lunch event and there was some programming in there. And one of the things that the organizers offered is if you're an entrepreneur and you want to have a table. So this was a Tuesday. I think the event was on a Sunday. I was like, yes, please. She was like, okay, please send me your logo. And I was like, yeah, my logo. Let me go make one up. Doing things that I know aren't the quote unquote right way, but it's how I'm going to start the momentum and get it going and consciously being okay with tweaking along the way. And so that has been interesting, again, how perfectionism has shown up there. And also the voice that comes along behind my actions of this defensiveness already internally, anticipating others' judgment that probably isn't even there. But if someone says, why aren't you doing it this way? Or why don't you have your website yet? Or like me telling this whole story, right? Like, oh, I know what I'm supposed to do. I'm intentionally not doing it that way though. It's silly. So again, this thread of perfectionism and how it's supposed to be done perfectly and it's supposed to look a certain way, when life has taught me over and over and over, you can't predict how it's going to look. So the value of showing up, being who I am, and doing it, and then adjusting, and not being afraid of adjusting, because nothing's ever finished. So I think that's also a lie of perfectionism. Like, it's this destination that isn't actually there.
It just keeps getting further away.
Yes. Yes.
And I mean, this idea that you have perfection on day 1 will look different than the one that you have on day 10 and day 50. And it's a moving target.
Right. And, your questions about how did I get to here and what from my childhood, like my life makes sense, but I couldn't have predicted it. I didn't envision it, but it all makes sense. So even like the role of trust in being brave or changing the relationship for failure, like trusting, even if it's not how you thought it was going to look, it'll be okay. Even if it's not okay, it will be okay. Like, we'll figure it out.
So as you find yourself creeping back towards that perfectionism, have you been able, it's one thing to see it, I'm doing it again.
Yeah.
But have you been good at catching yourself and reversing course, freeing yourself up a little or from that?
Yes. Again, I think it's a journey. So
yeah, it's not perfect.
And it is not. So in the examples that I've shared, like, yes, I see it there. I was able to enact it. You know, I created a brochure. I reread it. I know this from years in marketing and communication. Like, there's always going to be something. Like, the joke in publishing the college magazine was always like, don't read it once the boxes arrive, because you're going to find something that you missed. Like, don't read it once the boxes arrive. So, you know, found myself adding a little apostrophe in black pen because it got missed, but still using those where former Rebecca may have just scrapped them. Like, thrown away money, thrown away the paper. Like, it'll be fine. And if someone wants to judge me based on that, maybe we're not meant to work together, and that's okay too.
That's my whole thing with that, is when people say, I'm sick of people judging me or the criticisms are too much. There's one thing listening to people that have constructive criticism. You don't even have to make it easy on me. You can point out everything that's wrong. It's all about your delivery, obviously. But there's just so many people that give so much credence to and control away to people that are just kind of, you can kind of tell when it's a power trip criticism.
Yeah.
Because so many people that now I like to think that I gravitate towards great people who are doing great things, you know, present company included.
Thank you.
But it's amazing how you start paying attention to who's saying what, and you learn to keep your power, not give it away. So I think we've always been so scared of criticism, and then we were surrounded by the wrong people that were just throwing criticism. But then you surround yourself with the right people who can help you, who can answer questions, who can ask you questions about what they see, just so you can refine and realign where you're going and how you're moving through the world, whether it's life, whether it's work, your business, whatever it may be. But community is powerful. I mean, you know that more than anybody. So can you speak to that, about just that process of finding the right community? You know, you've operated in different worlds, education, farming, event planning. What is that? Can you speak to that power of finding that community, of finding the right people, but that accountability still exists?
Yeah. You know, it is interesting, and I think it's a priority shift, and I guess I'm kind of minding my words because I don't want it to sound elitist or condescending about like finding the right people or like big energy and low energy. So maybe it's about finding the energy that just matches you. Yeah. You know, finding community where, and not that necessarily you have to have similar beliefs, but maybe the way you carry yourself and the shared similarities of what actually matters. So like, does the rest of the content on that brochure matter, or are you hung up that I missed the apostrophe? And again, that does matter. Like, I had people apply for jobs where they would misspell my name, and I'm like, you can't apply to be an editor in a communications department and not correctly spell the person's name you're applying to work with. So like, there are some real things there. So I guess the context matters, right? Of finding your community, what you're looking for, what you're needing. You know, the groups that we certainly got to know each other in, we've said we learned each other from the inside out. And I think that's more and more what I look for now in my life, is like, what are you about versus what do you do? What are the big things? You know, what type of person are you? And I don't really care how you get a paycheck if it aligns with, you know, good, solid humanity. You're not taking advantage of other people. But I'm not going to judge you based on, you know, your income or your job title. Like, those things absolutely don't matter to me anymore. Are you a person that has passion and, you know, shows up in a way that, I don't know, that people that are in alignment with themselves, I guess. Like if you're comfortable being yourself, I want to be around you because I want to know what I can learn from you. I think I just took that on a big ramble, but working it out.
It all applies. It all applies. And it may sound like a ramble, but I don't think any of the questions that I ask are like cookie cutter answers. You know what I mean? It's not even leadership. What I ask you about leadership, the way you answer today could be different from 6 months from now. You still think leadership's important. You still think it should be somebody of values, but the way you word it is differently. So this show can be a ramble. This series can be a ramble just because there's just nothing is cookie cutter.
Yeah.
You know, there's little caveats that you have to put in. There's evolution of thought, the evolution of words, of perception. So no, I appreciate everything you've shared. Rebecca, when it comes to the book, can you give me a sense of how it's broken out, how it is she walks the reader through her message? You know, does she have sections with different chapters? Is it just one, list of chapters? Is it stories, exercises? What's that path she lays out for the reader?
Yeah, lots of different stories. Like I mentioned, some based in research, some of her own. Then she highlights some myths about failure, which I think is really helpful, and then highlights some strategies. So like when you think you failed, give yourself time to rest, but not enough time to wallow and be held down. So it's this setting the tone with kind of here are the examples of how perfectionism has shown up, how it's held people back. Here are some myths, about it. And then here are some strategies that you can actually take and carry into the world. And I think it's a smart approach, again, taking care of yourself. She talks about after that congressional run, needing some downtime, but ultimately like picking yourself back up and trying again, getting back on the horse, whatever it is. So while there's research and there's the power of story, there's also some really practically implementable strategies, like that idea of go out and do something. One of the examples that she gives is like send an email with a typo in it. And again, the first time I read that, I was like, yes, like coming from my younger self in that specifically communications and editing mode, and there's still sometimes I don't reshare a meme maybe because it's got a typo in it. Like that is so petty and small, but it's there. Or even if I do send an email with a typo in it and I catch it, can I just let it sit, or do I need to write another email to apologize for it? Or even in a text message. I did that the other day. Sent it to a very good friend. She knows what I mean. She's not editing, but I was like, oh my goodness, and then like wrote everything out because I was a victim of autocorrect.
I'll do that where you're writing here with your ears versus here. And I'm just writing so fast that I mean to write one, but write the other. And then I look at the email and I'm like, oh, you sound like an idiot. But it's that detachment. Detachment has come up in this series as well. Like you do the best you can. You send it out into the ether. And, as long as you have the right intention, as long as you try to get incrementally better, work in the right direction, you tried your best. It is what it is. Yeah.
Well, and so it kind of ties back to the other things we've talked about, right? The community, like who is it meant for? Do they need an apology? Do they need a correction? Or is that my internal compulsion to be perfect? Like, of course I know where is where. Like, silly iPhone.
Yeah.
This explaining that we actually don't need to do.
So for you don't have to explain the situation, but in a moment where you may have felt failure, in that moment you felt like it was a failure. In looking back, how do you look at that moment? And you don't even have to go into the specifics. Do you give yourself grace in hindsight? Do you think about the way you felt about it or the circumstances? Because just in all this talk about failure, it's come up in this series, but then I'm like, okay, I never really have thought back to when I've failed. Granted, I'm in this experimentation mode. If something doesn't work out, I'm fine with it. But even when you were just talking about failure, mentioning it, I was like, when was the last time I felt like I failed? Like I really let myself down? And then in hindsight, okay, was it a failure? Like what was the, what was it, what were the circumstances? What was within my control? What was outside of my control? So have there been moments in the past where you felt that failure, but then you were able to look back knowing now, you know, what you know, and looking at it differently?
Yeah.
It sounds like, I think we all do that, but I'm curious to see how you look back and how you kind of talk to a younger Rebecca and say, you know, this wasn't failure. This was just the moment or the circumstances or whatever it may be.
Yeah, so it's interesting. A couple of things are popping up like popcorn in my brain here. So historically, I'm pretty good at navigating the bigger things, like the bigger disappointments. My perfectionism shows up in these little irritations, which again, I shared with you.
I could tell by your voice, like these little irritations.
Which it's extra annoying because, again, the difference between intellectually knowing something versus implementing it and changing your behavior. Behavioral change is tough. You know, it's so tough. So, you know, when I think about the bigger things, like there are disappointments because maybe I stayed too long somewhere. I stayed in an unhealthy work environment. Like someone might label that a failure. Truly, I have not. And how I labeled it is kind of, it takes the time it takes for me to be sure in my decision. So probably there is some perfectionism in there, you know, fueling that, right? The idea that, well, I don't want to leave too soon. I want to make sure I gave it a shot. Like I want to make sure I did my best. That's probably somewhere underlying. But when I leave, I am sure, I am so sure. And it's probably because I stayed too long. So again, I think the lens that you look at it could be different, but I truly have looked at those as learning opportunities and do my best to integrate and not repeat. I think the other thing, probably sadly, is the regret of not trying things shows up maybe more than the hardcore failure of something because there's been less courage and more caution. And I connect that to the other piece of why this book felt relevant for me again now, where I'm seeing perfectionism show up differently, is in using my voice where the stakes are a little higher. So I'm definitely drawn to humanitarian issues and social justice and racial justice, and that's been a journey for me. And I've consumed all this knowledge, things have been integrated, and I'm still very cautious about using my words. And this is something that I'm actively in the process of kind of like beating myself up about. And it comes from, I don't want to say the wrong thing. I don't want to make someone more upset. And there's a lot of perfectionism in progressive movements. There is a lot of people saying you're not doing it right, you're not doing enough. And it makes it hard for people to try. And I think I'm okay with saying that as a collective and not just speaking for myself. And, you know, in this online culture specifically, you know, it's really easy to be attacked, and who wants to deal with that? But I think that is a really important place right now with where my values are and what I feel aligned with emotionally, spiritually, how I want to show up. And I'm not quite showing up as I want to yet because I just haven't, my bravery muscle's just not quite there. But it's coming. I know it's coming.
Yeah, and I think as long as you have, again, it's all wording. This is just the way I see it. But as long as you have like the right heart, you have the best intentions, it's your process. In terms of perfection, I've said it on here just in talking about stuff where, listen, I apologize in advance. I don't have the right vernacular, the right wording. I'm thinking in real time. It's sloppy. It's not perfect. Where in the past, I think I would have tried to word it perfectly. There are some topics where, no, I don't know the right language, or I don't know even, I may know how I feel, but I'm not putting the right words to it. So I'll just caveat so many conversations with, okay, I'm just thinking out loud here. I'm not saying this perfect, or I can be clumsy with my words, but my intentions are there. And I've had a conversation with somebody here where they said, the impact matters more than the intention. So if you don't get it right, your intention doesn't matter.
Yep.
And I'm like, listen, we're human. We're clumsy. If somebody has the right intention and they don't get it right, I mean, this is a conversation you could have for hours.
Yes.
But it all goes back to this perfection and just kind of pulling the trigger and saying, okay, it's not perfect, but I'm human. Yeah. I'm just pulling back the curtain. I'm human. I'm not going to get it right all the time, but my fucking intentions are there. Yeah. I want this to work out.
Yeah.
Well, as we started, I'll tell everybody right now, I read the intro 4 times and kept fucking up on your last name. Like, who cares? We're human, you know? Like, and I was getting and you were watching it. You were watching it as I was getting frustrated. I kept messing it up. We're human. It is what it is. We're clumsy. I think so much of the problem that comes up these days is that perfection that's needed. Yeah. If you agree with my message, I'm going to need you to say it my way. Use these words. Use this tone. Show up here. Wait, what? You have your own experience and you didn't live my experience? No, it doesn't matter. This is the way you have to say it. It's crazy, you know, and so many people go along with the words but not really understanding what they're saying because they haven't lived them and we haven't had that conversation. But in any case, that's a great example of that journey towards or trying to achieve perfection, and it holds people back from being their true selves because they can't demonstrate, I don't have it perfect right away. I'm clumsy and I'm learning. So amazing point to bring up. That's huge for this kind of conversation.
Yeah, it is huge. And like, what is left, you know, what gifts are left, held back, not shared, all because of this anticipation of judgment or not being perfect enough. And, you know, I agree, like the impact does matter, you know, absolutely. And the intention matters. Absolutely. I think it takes more time to understand intention, and so often we don't slow down or have the privilege of time to explore an intention. But yeah, that thing, like I will rattle off a voice memo to myself that is something that's a passionate opinion, and I'll record it or I'll write something down, and then I'm like, I'll go back and read that later and then I'll share it. And like the reading it later always becomes the undoing to the sharing. And probably not because there's anything in there that's horrible, but I overthink it. And when I share with close friends, they're not pointing out anything, you know, they're not critiquing it. But that inner voice inside of me, or the one that's anticipating everything that could go wrong by using my voice, or, you know, to relate back to your other question, you just attract the audience that's meant for you.
Exactly. And I mean, you don't have to worry about attracting an audience, like you said, that's just going to say yes to you and agree with you all the time. You can have differences, but I think what your intention is, I just want to grow, I want to develop, I want to be curious, I want to learn, I don't want to harm anybody else. Yeah. Are you that? Are you real about that? That's it. As long as you meet those criteria, in general, everything else can fall into place. So, Rebecca, for the author of this book, you said did you read any of her other books by chance?
I have another one on my bookshelf that I can't quite see from here. She's written a new one called Pay Up. She's kind of transitioned into parental rights and pay for mothers and like long-term care and the expense of childcare, and how that's actually an economic issue, not a mother issue. That when we support people in the workplace, when we enable people to have families, you know, how that affects our culture. So that's kind of been her journey. And even recently, just this year, she gave a speech at a graduation where she was talking more about boys, you know, and saying like, a lot of my career has focused on like women and girls, and we need to start applying, you know, these same things to the wellness of boys. And just as we expect maybe girls to be perfect, we expect boys and men to be daring, brave, risk takers. And either way, we do a disservice to all of us when we try to put someone in a box for gender or any other reason. You know, not allowing humans to live their full experience of emotions and social spiritual growth. Like, we all lose when that happens. And I think we're seeing the consequences of that ongoing in our culture, and even the wanting to return people to boxes. Like, I firmly believe, like, we all lose when we are stunted, and not free, to pull back the word that you introduced before.
Yeah. No, and I appreciate her bringing that up, addressing boys, because that's another one of those kinds of conversations where I'm like, okay, I don't know if I'm going to use the right words, but I'm just thinking through this out loud, and it was recorded on one of these, right? But it had to do with the guest. A few of the guests have been strong allies of men, and they were women, and I appreciated that, just because I think it's not a zero-sum game, but I think with all the other groups getting more attention, getting more resources, getting more advocacy, men do tend to kind of fall behind in that kind. Again, maybe I'm not using the right words, but please, my intentions are real. So I appreciate that, because it does open up a conversation. Men have their own set of needs. Boys especially have their own. Men have gone through their growth, their development. They're further along in solidifying who they are, still learning, hopefully. But boys are more impressionable. So are they going to be left behind in some sense because the sins of men of the past? So, but that's another conversation where, again, I tread lightly with my words, and I try to be careful, but if I don't say anything now, the regret is going to eat me up later. And that's kind of what, I've never been a perfectionist at all, but that's kind of what helps me pull the trigger on things today, even this series, where if I put it off because it has to be perfect and I'm still tweaking it, I'm going to regret it later.
Yeah.
So it's not that I have the best of confidence today, but it's just I'm trying to avoid the worst regret later.
And all we can do is show up today with whatever we can as we can. To your point, like, you asked me that question about leadership tomorrow, it's going to be a little bit different because it is authentic and it's not been memorized and it's not perfect. And I think to allow space for people to just become who they are. There was another book, I've been on a real kind of spirituality kick, but a lovely book by Rebecca Campbell called Your Soul Had a Dream and Your Life Is It. And in there, she talks about each of us holds a thread for the common good of humanity, and never underestimate the thread that you're holding. And I just, like, that gives me tinglies every time I say it and think it. So whether applying it to perfection, or applying it to gender, or applying it to diversity, the construction of race, like, we're all here for a reason, and we all have gifts, and the way that we either self-edit or self-stifle or allow an external force to just stop us from growing and evolving and becoming whoever we are here to be is so profoundly sad to me. It's so profoundly sad. We're
getting closer to wrapping up this episode, but before we do, when you speak of spirituality, when did that come into your thoughts, your mindset, your way of being, spirituality? Like, it's one thing, the losses of your parents, reprioritizing what's important to your life, what you want to give meaning to, all this. But then where did spirituality come in?
Yeah, so let's see, succinctly. I grew up going to Catholic school. Doesn't have to be succinctly.
But go ahead.
I'm mindful of episode time, John. So I grew up not necessarily being raised religious, but went to Catholic school for 6 years. Really, I would not call myself a religious person. I would not call myself Catholic. I also would not use the label Christian. Spiritual feels best for me. Faithful feels best for me. I think I'm someone that really has observed how organized religion by imperfect humans can do some harm. And then being introduced to movements like Kingian nonviolence and Dr. King's vision for a beloved community centering on our shared humanity, I think looking at why things have happened in life, not necessarily for explanation, but those lessons, like these things aren't accidental, and reconnecting with myself. I think that Jill, who created the BioCode System, she's a fascinating person, and this system kind of came to her in a very intuitive way. And I remember when we first met, she was sharing the names of all these people, including Wayne Dyer and Louise Hay and all of these people. And I'm just like, don't know what you're talking about. Not really interested in what you're talking about.
Yeah.
So it's just been an interesting evolution. A couple years ago, I went to a psychic. I would do that on my birthday for fun, not because I was going to make my life plan out of it, but because there are questions and makes me think things. And ultimately did a few sessions with her around spiritual healing that I didn't know that I needed, that unlocked some things, and just reconnecting with a higher power. Only very recently have I been able to say God without feeling cringy. And I think that's some religious damage. I was much more comfortable with source and the universe. Yeah, that's a whole big conversation, but it's something that I would attribute as a reason why I'm feeling healthy and good and optimistic, because I feel this connectedness with a creator and a soul and a purpose, and each and every person on this planet, which also can invite some pain and frustration. The spiritual journey has very much been the opposite of apathy, I guess, if I were to put that in a sentence. But I'm here for it. Life feels better feeling connected, believing that we're all part of each other's journey.
Absolutely. And now wrapping up, Rebecca, is there anything else you want to share that I might have missed out on or not asked you about? Anything you're up to these days? Anything at all? The floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you so much. I think we covered a lot. I always appreciate being in conversation with you. So I'm thankful for this opportunity and that we were able to revisit, and would just encourage anyone listening, if you feel like you are holding yourself back because of this vision of perfection, whatever it is to you, I think perfection is in the eye of the beholder, right? So try to let yourself be free yourself from whatever that vision is, and just start something and try and show up. And you'll find yourself along the journey, I think, and that's a really fun path to travel. And of course, if I just an explicit invitation, if you are interested in connecting with others through conversation, I would invite anyone and everyone to the Connext Exchange, which is our conversation series that meets every Thursday, and you can find us on socials.
Absolutely. And I'll include that link when I post this, but the Connext Exchange is amazing. It is these kind of conversations. Everybody is welcome. There have been difficult topics covered, but everybody kind of brings their own voice, their own opinions to it. It's an environment of respect and openness. It's been incredible, and it's one of the reasons I started this podcast, was just seeking out conversations. So it was one of those reasons that I wanted to do this, was just to get to know my community more, get to know my network more. So I'm appreciative to Brent, to Fathom, to create what's needed, the Connext Exchange, all of it. And I'm appreciative to you, Rebecca, my friend. Thank you so much for coming on. And Rebecca talked about, or shared, Brave, Not Perfect, Fear Less, Fail More, and Live Bolder by Reshma Saujani. And I want to thank Rebecca again for being here. Again, every conversation with you is amazing, because we know we're that open. We're not closed-minded. So anything that comes up, we're game for the conversation. The language doesn't have to be perfect. We know we're clumsy, but we just jump in and do the thing. So thank you so much.
Yes, thank you. No disclaimers needed when we chat. I appreciate that as well.
Absolutely. And if there's anything I missed, we're limited on time. I drag my guests down tangents and rabbit holes. But if there's something that you're curious about that I should have asked, let me know. I'll reach out to Rebecca for any additional insight, wisdom, knowledge, whatever it may be. In the meantime, thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. Thank you for subscribing, and I'll talk to you soon. Take care. Bye.